Welcome to another episode of Beyond Four Walls, the podcast that delves deep into the stories and insights of extraordinary individuals shaping the property industry. Today, I have the pleasure of hosting a truly remarkable guest, Nigel Glen. And Nigel's journey is nothing short of fascinating. With a doctorate in animal behaviour, he embarked on an international career spanning the global oil, financial, software and investment banking sectors. In 2009, he took a bold step into the property management industry by founding his own company, which he successfully sold in 2016. He was appointed CEO of the Association of Residential Managing Agents. During his tenure, he played a pivotal role in engaging with government ministries, Parliament, TV and the press through challenging times, including the Grenfell tragedy and the COVID-19 pandemic. In 2022, he orchestrated the merger between ARMA and the IRPM to form the Property Institute, becoming its executive chair with a keen focus on net zero. And in 2023, Nigel joined the board of Emeria, the world's largest property services company with a staggering turnover of 1.5 billion. And he also serves as a special industry advisor for Fixflo, a prop tech company, and an ESG advisor for the Residential Freehold Association. And beyond his professional achievements, Nigel's enduring fascination with science and the natural world continues to inspire him. I think this is going to be a really interesting podcast, Nigel. Thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure.
So your career clearly spans multiple industries, from animal behaviour, investment banking. So what led you to move into property management?
A bit by accident, really. I was an RMC director at where I lived for a couple of years. And if I'm blunt, I'd retired at the creaky old age of 48, so it was a bit early to retire. We had a property management company, and I just thought, well, it's money for nothing. I can do better than them. So just talked to another director who offered to join me, and the board said, we'll support you. If you want to go down that route, we'll transfer it to you. And so that's how I got into it. So started my own company with my business partner, Richard.
What were the key challenges you faced, do you think, when you started your property company?
We'll come on to this a bit later as well. I mean, a key challenge was we didn't know what we were doing. This is one of the problems, we literally set up in the back bedroom, and then our client gave us $500,000 of their own money to look after. So hopefully we were one of the good guys that we bothered to go and hire a lawyer. We spent a day with the lawyer who explained things like Section 20s and so forth. So at least we made that effort. But that was a difficulty. Other thing was, as we grew, finding staff, finding systems, etc., because again, you're going from scratch there. And then the third thing was how sticky the business is. That's good, but it also means it's quite hard to grow early on because everybody, they might not be happy with the managing agent, but it's, you're all the same. What's the point of moving? Or just frankly, I always talk about this one where somebody said, you're the managing agent we've always wanted, but you're 10 quid more expensive per annum than these guys. And it's kind of, so we have to go with the cheapest. So I think those are the things that surprised us, to be quite honest.
I feel your pain there. Although I had 10 years prior to me starting my company, and I knew about Section 20s, obviously, and I knew how to be a property manager. Being a property manager and running your own business are two very different things.
Yeah.
So yeah, I completely understand those challenges. But as CEO of ARMA then, and going through, I mean, Grenfell was just, I talk about Grenfell a lot in this podcast, and the challenges that obviously have come with that for our industry. But working through those events and COVID-19, how did you manage that, from a professional and personal perspective?
The professional one was, the role of ARMA at the stage was to lead the industry for the firms, and so we had to decide what to do about that. And luckily, I mean, how did I cope with it? Simple. I had a great team behind me. Noella's fantastic COO. The team was there. We trusted each other. We delegated stuff, and we worked together as a team, and you can do a lot when you have that trust in each other. So that's really how we coped with it. We talked to the industry, asked what you wanted. So some of it, just tell us what's going on. I don't know if you remember, I used to give weekly talks for about an hour. And so they'd take 5 or 6 hours to prep. But people even now kind of say that just really helped us because we just didn't know what was happening. And just having somebody give us some advice or give us something we could talk to our leaseholders about was the significant thing. Well, personally, I think those are sort of ARMA's finest days, really.
Yeah, I mean, you all did such an incredible job to support us through that time, especially through COVID, because as you say, none of us really knew what to do. Obviously we knew we couldn't be with people, but what about the communal areas? And we still had contractors working, but what was the safety measures? And I think if you remember, I actually won the Pandemic Response Award back in the
Congratulations.
news on the block back in 2021 because of how I approached it. So I think, there are good ones out there. There are good managing agents out there. And I think I'll go on to talk to you about that later. But where do you think your most impactful changes that you implemented at ARMA?
Well, the first one was stopping it going bust.
Okay.
It had about 12 months left to live because it was chewing through its reserves so fast. So that was quite difficult. Obviously involved some staff changes, which is always painful and unpleasant. Reviewing the fee structures, going out to talk to particularly the firms who were going to be affected most and explaining why, which was good because it started a personal relationship, working through adversity together. I think that was that. Another big one, which people still talk about, or some people still say, was changing government's opinion of property managers from being part of the problem to being a part of the solution. That took a few years of working with them. And how you do that, instead of going to government saying, well, this is wrong, you have to go and say, look, that doesn't quite work. Have you thought of doing this instead? What you propose might not be right. What you're showing is a willingness to try and come up with answers instead of problems.
Yeah.
So that was good. And I think the membership did appreciate that. People kind of stayed at the time, still do. I always knew you had my back, which is really nice when people say that. So it's that feeling of being a part of a membership, being having somebody on your side. So I think that was it. And I suppose the biggest change was after Grenfell. I could see that a lot of legislation was going to come out of that. So ARMA pivoted from being, if you like, a trade association into much more of a political animal. We hired a lobbying firm. And again, the relationships came up. I didn't have the money for that. So I went to the top 10 CEOs who, bless them, all sort of said, yeah. And I explained, I need the money. I'll pay for it next year, but I can't do it this year. This is why I think we need to do it. And they all agreed and put the money in out of their own, if you like, corporate pockets. So that was a big change. And ARMA and the TPI has been politically active ever since.
When you say that, actually, that for our listeners, and if there's any leaseholders or people looking for new agents, you don't hear about that stuff, do you? You don't hear that the bigger companies are actually trying to help the industry by providing their own money to keep something going like ARMA in order for you to continue to support us and the smaller agents. I mean, that's quite incredible, really. I never knew that. So
they're very generous with time and people as well. So, it's easier for them. Putting the other side of thing, they can afford to pay people or pay salaries of people who spend quite a lot of time on ARMA committees. It's harder for a small, for my company, that would have been really difficult to give up a quarter of a person. So I'm not pushing it down. It is easier for them. But no, I thought that was really nice because the industry does stick together. It does recognize mutual issues, mutual problems. To me, that was part of what I was trying to do, which was turn ARMA into a family. The ACE Awards, for example, it's nice to have awards, but the whole function behind them is, if you like, a summer ball. And the first one I did, I remember so many people came up to me and said, I really feel like I belong to something now. Rather than that thing ARMA that was in a white tower in Wimbledon, there's people. I just feel part of it. And that was really nice as well. That was why we did it.
Oh, that's incredible. I love the ACE Awards. They're good fun. When you say about the 12 months away from going bust, was that the significant driver maybe behind the merger with IRPM? No, right.
Within a year we turned it round. It's not, sounds a bit flippant. It's not that hard to do, particularly with a membership organization, because frankly, you get your costs down and then you go to the members and say, look, if you want us to continue, this is what the membership's going to be. If they believe in you, then they'll pay that. But no, ARMA was profitable from after the first year.
Oh, right.
So the merger had absolutely nothing to do. There were different drivers there.
Okay. Can you explain what some of those drivers were?
Yeah, some of it was practical. By that stage, we'd been engaged with government through many, many years. Andrew Bulmer from the IRPM and I just found ourselves in the same meetings saying the same things. So it started making us think, well, hang on, this is a bit daft, isn't it? So the thought was, why not have to quote the phrase, why not have a bigger dog in the fight? The other thing is we were obviously duplicating. A, attendance, B, people working in the back room. So we were thinking, well, surely we could do a lot more with the same. So it wasn't a typical sort of commercial merger where you're looking for synergy so you can get rid of back office staff and you cut costs out. This was, no, nobody's going to lose their jobs. It's actually going to grow a bit more. So it just made more and more sense. We talked about it in the past. We hadn't quite got round to it, if I'm blunt. There's a personal reason as well that I joined ARMA on the basis of being a part-time CEO. I could see it needed a full-time CEO, and that wasn't what I wanted to do. And I also think CEOs have got a certain life expectancy. You can't keep doing it forever. And it was my time to move on.
So with the formation of the Property Institute, then, how do you believe that's benefited the industry?
I think it's helped with the relations with government. So, for example, there'd be bizarre things in the past, like there was the Commonwealth Council, and the IRPM was on that, and ARMA wasn't. So, frankly, I went apoplectic at that. Given that firms are the people who actually contract, why are we not in that? IRPM, absolutely fine for them to be on it, but why not us? So it solved that conundrum, because Andrew and I found ourselves being put on different committees, and then having to go back. And Andrew sort of joked that he was seeing more of me than his wife at the time. It was probably true. So I think it's easier from that point of view. And like I say, you've got more people now focused rather than duplicating. You can achieve more with what you've currently got.
Well, I think it's going really well. Obviously, it took a while, didn't it, to cross all of the T's and dot all the I's and get everything ship shape. But I think there's no point in launching something if it's not right. So you might as well wait until it is and then tell everybody about it.
Yeah, absolutely. A huge amount of work went into it. I mean, we had a shadow board operating for 12 months beforehand, discussing everything. I learned more about VAT than I ever want to in my life again, corporate taxes and so forth. I've done mergers before, but I've never led one. So it was really personally interesting from that point of view, all the legislation and stuff you had to go through, the accounting, etc.
Okay.
Much more interesting than, due diligence where you're just chipping in it. It's when you've got to sort of think of the questions and, right, we're going to need committees. Who can we do that? And again, the board were great on that. We shared it round. People would go off, come back, get some advice from the rest of the board. It was really interesting to do it.
And a real team effort by the sounds of it.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. So you have a very strong interest with net zero. Where do you see the sector contributing towards this ambitious goal, shall we say, that the government have put on us?
It is ambitious. Where will the sector come into it? Well, it's fundamental because 17% of the CO2 comes from buildings, and most of that is resi. And frankly, that's gas, most of that. Who else is in a position to change that? I think it's actually a real positive. I talk about net zero and I say to property managers, it is daunting, no question about that. But what other projects are you doing today that will change the lives of generations to come, if you can help? And I think hopefully you can get pride out of that. You can look at yourself in the mirror a different way. What can property managers do? Part of it is difficult because leasehold law is almost inadvertently designed to stop net zero, because you're probably doing improvements. Part of the TPI's job, dangerous ground there because I'm not part of the TPI anymore, so I hope I'm not putting words into Andrew's mouth, but it's to liaise with government and say, look, if you want this, we have to sort of look at leasehold legislation and tweak it a bit to allow improvements. Obviously, you don't want to lose safeguards, etc., but that's one way of doing it. Otherwise, all we can do is repair or replace the gas boiler by law. And the law's been put there for very good reasons, but it hasn't taken into account future. So there's things you can do there. There's things that you can do now. I mean, it's all going to be technology based, but I find myself droning on and on about return temperature deltas on gas boilers, the efficiency of those. You can make a huge difference there. Because a surprise to me was when I started talking to heat network people about efficiencies. I thought, well, it's obviously in the flats where you can put timers, you can put thermostats, that's where you do it. And all the heat network experts said, no, it's in the central distribution. That's where most heat is lost. And it's true. And that's the bit that we can do something about. So there's things we can do there. There's all sorts of practical measures. I'm sure everybody's already put motion detectors, LEDs, etc. Part of it as a community is let's find better tech and share it. So I talk with people in Finland, Australia, Canada, the States. I talk to other organizations in the UK, so the ARL, NRLA, TPI, etc., because the legislation is going to be different for each of us, but the technology is going to be the same. Might be in different directions, like Australia's got the opposite problem that we do, which is getting rid of heat. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
But let's work together and figure this out. Because one of the things is, I haven't seen government being particularly strong on this. We've still got the 2050, but that's a long way away in many people's eyes. And governments are very good at shoving that onto the next government. I think there's things that we, again, can do as an industry. I'm talking to the finance sector to see if there's ways that we can bring in adjustments to mortgages based on if you buy a property that's D and you turn it into a C, will benefit you. Now, I don't know if they're going to go for it. We're just starting early days of talking, but let's try and find different ways. Let's get creative about this.
Yeah, definitely. And you can get green mortgages, but whether that falls into the leasehold mortgage
Yeah.
sector, because, you can't control the whole building, you can just control your little part of it. But yeah, I find it really, really interesting, and I'm always looking at ways how, my firm can try and help the leaseholders, with car charging
Yeah.
and that sort of thing to assist. But yeah, I find it really interesting. So we might have to talk a bit more on that on another day.
No, happy to. I mean, there's the big picture stuff as well. Where do we generate it? How do you distribute it? It's all very well saying let's put heat pumps in everywhere, but if the copper wires down the street can't go, what's the point?
Well, yeah.
So that's one of again the things that somebody like TPI can do, which is talk to the government saying, give us the big picture, and we'll feed in about the practicalities. And again, let's try and work together to figure this difficult thing out. If it was
Yeah.
easy, then we'd have done it already.
Well, absolutely. And it's working with local authorities as well around, again, a bit like you say with different countries and their regulations. Different counties have different local authorities, obviously, who have different rules, or aren't, maybe some aren't as strict around listed buildings and that sort of thing. But, a lot of heat is lost out of windows, and all these listed buildings have got the single glazed sash windows. There has to be some compromise somewhere along the line.
That's a good example. One of the things that we were this cross-industry group that lead, I suppose is the word, in that I'm the one who arranges the the diaries, is planning permission. You've got a row of terrace houses. Why can't the council say, look, anybody in this row can change to double glazing, rather than have to do it one by one, planning permission wise? Give that blanket and write to them all and say, here's our blessing. Just go and put your double glazing in.
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be easier?
Well, it would. You'd think that, but logic must prevail somewhere along the line,
Yeah.
right? So tell me about Emeria, your role, responsibilities there, why you joined.
Oh, the why you joined is an interesting one. It's a non-exec directorship. I sit on the main board, and as you said, it's a very large company. It's kind of more back to my roots, which is finance. The property management. It's a property services firm, so it does estates, estate agencies. It does all aspects. The UK is only a very small part of its portfolio, so it's interesting from that point of view. The two things I do, that's a non-exec director, but I'm also president or chair of their ESG committee. So that's playing back into my hands. Now that's currently looking at operations, what we can do internally, what we can do to clients, et cetera, and that's a multi-year program. Those are the things I'm engaged with. I'm being a little bit coy because I'm conscious that I have to be careful what I talk about about my day-to-day stuff.
Yeah.
But it was a big role, and to my mind, just too interesting to turn down. So it was a no-brainer.
So flipping then across to your advisory role for Fixflo, what trends do you see emerging in the prop tech space?
The obvious one is AI. I went to Cass Zanelli's Oxford do, which she does each year, and if you don't go to it, I can strongly recommend it.
I'm going to go. It always seems to fall when I've got something on with my daughter. So I will. But I'm going to stick it in the diary for next year. Definitely.
No, do it. It is great. It is great. But to my mind, one of the best demos last time was Colin Stokes, who turned up and talked about AI, and it was absolutely fascinating how AI can help. Now, it's not Terminator stuff where it takes over the world, but if you think about what people want, they want the problem to go away. My boiler has stopped working. All they want is for the boiler to work. So if AI can say, have you thought about flicking it on and off, then so what?
Oh, yeah.
The only bit I don't like about AI is when somebody says, hello, my name is Bruce. And you go, no, I know I'm talking to a computer. Don't give me that Bruce rubbish. I don't like it when people try and shimmy with it. But Fixflo, for example, it's got in there videos, how to turn your boiler on and off, so I think that sort of tech can help. I'm looking to find tech that will help leaseholders as a whole. A big one, as I mentioned, looking at return flow temperatures in communal boilers, and you can do it on your own boiler as well. There's tech there, which to my mind will change property management, how they look at stuff, because classically the boilers, we'll send a boiler technician in every 6 months who to service it, tick, done it. Whereas actually what you should be doing is looking for software and hardware that you can plug into that actively monitors that delta and ideally adjusts it. So it's always running optimally rather than once in every 6 months people go in and sort of give it a bit of a tweak. And frankly, what they might be doing is just hoovering off a bit of dust and scrubbing the heat exchangers a little bit. So I think that's what we can start looking at. And again, that's the responsibility of, I think, groups of us coming together, because Vattenfall have developed this heat pump. One of the problems with heat pumps is if you unplug a gas boiler and put a heat pump in, they work differently. gas boilers, 80 degrees hot water comes out, whereas heat pumps 40 degrees. How will your radiators cope with lots of sort of lukewarm water? Well, Vattenfall have developed one that does 80. So actually, you could maybe just unplug one and plug the other one if that's what we want to do. So it's finding that technology. They're rolling that out in the Netherlands. It's not over here. But again, let's sound like quite evangelical about it, but let's help each other on this.
Yeah, definitely. I think AI has its place, obviously. As you say, you don't want it to replace, or some property managers might want it to replace them, who knows? But yeah, I think it's a good starting point, isn't it? Like, as you say, when somebody needs something to be done, they just want the instructions. They don't necessarily need to speak to somebody. They just need to know, the info. So yeah, great. So ESG, and for those who don't know, environmental, social and governance. What are your thoughts on the importance of it in the property management industry?
Well, I think it's vital. I am a believer in climate change, and I'm sure some people are going to throw brickbats at me that climate change is a fallacy. Well, we're all entitled to our opinion, but that's my personal one. As a scientist, I think it is there. And like I said, it's a huge part of the UK CO2. Pretty much transport's the only one that overtakes it. So who else is going to do it? It's not going to be the landlord. It's not probably going to be the leaseholder. So it's the property manager who's going to do that. The first thing property managers can do is look at their own ESG. That's kind of a small part. And at the moment, I'm focusing on the E rather than the S and the G. Well, we can come on to the others if you like. But, you can do your own stuff, which is make sure that your offices are efficient, that you turn the dial, the usual stuff, turn the dial down, yada, yada, yada. I think a big one is try not to drive around doing meetings so much. That's what Zoom is for. That's, I think, one of the few decent things that came out of COVID. You and I both know about the Holy Gazard. It safeguards people because you don't have, and I'm going to be sexist here, particularly, I was always worried about ladies coming home at 10 o'clock at night on public transport. That's just not funny. And that was an aspect, whereas now you can Zoom in instead. Yeah. So you're at home and you're safe. So I think there's things like that we can look at. But no, property managers, as I said, there's lots of practical things they can do. They are almost uniquely placed to be able to do it. And I think it's a source of pride.
Oh, I agree, and I'm with you on climate change. It's incredibly important. As a mother of a little girl as well, and any children that she may have and they may have, and we've got to protect ourselves and future generations. So I'm with you on that. So, are there any initiatives that you're particularly excited about that you're working on at the moment?
I wouldn't say working on, like I say, that Vattenfall, I'd like to go and see that. So I'm going to ask if I can go and see it. I went to Worcester Bosch a while back to their research and development unit to find out what they're up to. The thing I do want most at the moment is to sit down with government and understand what their plan is. We have a new government. We've had a couple of things come out recently, which I don't think, sorry, I'm going to sound a bit secret squirrel, but I don't think I can talk about, but I'd like to know much more about what the bigger plan is, because one of the dangers with what we've seen in the past is, government does something like, we'll give you a grant to install a heat pump. Now, somebody sarcastically said, well, all that did was give rich people a bit of money back of something they were going to do anyway, because the delta in price between a gas boiler and a heat pump is so much. Giving $5,000 back doesn't go anywhere near. That to me is not a good use of money. You will have, if the government is serious about net zero, which it is legally contracted to do, it's going to have to prime the pump. There's a government-backed bank in Germany, for example, that we could perhaps learn from, where the private banks give out grants to people to do improvements. So it overcomes that initial capital problem of, well, the gas boiler costs $3,000 and a heat pump costs 12. Can we do things like that over here? So again, talk to the government. As I said, talk about the distribution networks. How are you doing this? How does it all fit together? So the thing I really want at the moment is excited about, I think it's more a need, is to understand what the government's vision is, particularly having a new government, and how joined up that is, because that's when we know how we can help, how we can flag difficulties, because just giving out a boiler grant to me isn't the answer.
No, I completely agree. Well, I look forward to hearing your updates on that then. If you can get in front of government, that'd be great. Just go and stand outside, demand to go in. So, memorable moments from your career. You've had a pretty incredible career. I've always admired you as a person as well. Can you tell me some memorable moments that you'd like to share?
People. I think back on the people I've met. I still go out to lunch with guys I joined BP with, I'm ashamed to say, 40 years ago. So I've been helped by people all the way along. And, I like collecting them and keeping in touch with them. And it's not easy. They're scattered all over the planet, but I do like that. Things that I'm going into number 10, that's a bit weird. I think you turn into a kid because the first thing you think of is, I can't wait to tell mum and dad about this.
Yeah.
It's really weird. So I think that's something. Flying to Australia. So, completely leaving all your life behind to start again. I've had to do that, 4 or 5 times now.
Oh, wow.
That's a bit weird. All your friends, family, everybody you know, all your possessions follow you about 6 months later on a ship. So that's something. Public speaking. My first one was actually in Austria, and I had to do it in German, which is a bit daunting. So I think that's why I'm kind of comfortable with public speaking, because that was a bit of a baptism of fire.
Yes, I'm sure.
9/11, I was there for that, and
Oh, wow.
lost my friend and head of office, which was pretty horrible. So I watched that. So that was that a career thing? It taught me about teamwork and managing through disasters, if I can try and get some positives. And the odd thing, being made redundant, I've been made redundant 3 times. And I always tell people it's such a positive experience because it solves the complacency conundrum, because it's so easy to stay in a job, even if you don't like it. But being made redundant absolutely forces you to kind of go, now what do I do? Because you're saying about my different careers. Well, that's why I've changed so much, because I've been lucky in that most of the new jobs, somebody said, well, I know you, why didn't you come across? And the redundancies made that possible. But, don't be afraid of being made redundant. It is, it's not nice at the time psychologically, even if you've engineered it. A couple of times I engineered my own redundancy, but even then you always feel a bit sorry for yourself. But it is a tremendous positive, because it does force you to reevaluate what you want to do.
It makes you take that step back, doesn't it?
It does. What do you enjoy? Why do you want to do this? And so leaving TPI to take up a very part-time job with Emeria, it's only a couple of days a month. I've built up a portfolio, like you say, as they call it, with Fixflo, with the RFA, and there's another firm I'm going to be working with fairly shortly. I haven't done that announcement yet, but that allows me a lot more time for myself as well, which is what I want.
So you recently defended managing agents against negative press, which I think was a really incredible thing for you to do. Can you elaborate on your views and why you believe this defense is important?
Yeah, I guess old habits die hard, and that was my job at ARMA and TPI. So that was the first part of it, I think. There's also 2 aspects to it, which is why I was involved in it. One, it was basically saying managing agents are gouging and cheating by artificially inflating service charges. I felt obliged to defend managing agents because they're not people who sit in volcanoes with white cats, waking up every morning trying to figure out how to take money off people. They're generally doing the best job they can. And I think the other thing is, you see it in the press, you see it with politicians as well, and groups. I think it's important to try and nip in the bud misconceptions, because I've had this before. The only way to slash your service charge, and slash is the word that's always used, is to manage it yourself. That's very emotive. So this is what you need to do is actually put the data on there, because if people are going to go through all the time, trouble, expense of going to self-management, which is not easy, as we both know, you've got to know that it's the right thing to do. So I looked at, courtesy of the members, and TPI has done it recently as well. I looked at 250,000 units in blocks of 10 and above, and what was the service charge? And roughly 50-50 split. If it was operated by the leaseholders themselves, either because they own it or RTM'd it, or by a third-party landlord. And the numbers were, if you operate it yourself, from memory, 2,190, and if a third-party landlord did it, 2,150. Now, to me, that showed, A, that managing agents were doing the best they could, because whoever was instructing them, the numbers came out pretty much the same. And B, the argument of the only way to slash your service charges is to manage it yourself doesn't hold water. So I think it's important that there's 2 aspects there. One, defending managing agents because they're not bad people. They're doing the best they can in the circumstances. And B, to stop politicians and the media kind of saying, oh, there's skullduggery going on here, which is just wrong in that particular example.
Well, thank you for standing up for us and for all managing agents and property managers. But how do you think managing agents themselves can engage with their leaseholders and try and improve reputation, build trust with the public? I mean, I personally think it's all about communication.
Yep.
If they know what's going on and you're informing them of what's going on, then they feel like they've got control of the situation and they understand the situation more. But any thoughts on reputation building?
There's a few things we can do. One is exactly that. What I used to do was go and talk to the ombudsman and talk to the FTTP and say, and to lease. I think if I go to the past, my members end up in front of you. And 95% of that is exactly that. It was communication. And I always remember an example we gave to my staff, which is where a lift had gone down and the part had to come from Finland. And after a few days, said, well, have you let them all know that we're still on track for, 10 days' time? Well, no, I told them a few days ago that it's 2 weeks. But put yourself in their shoes. As far as they're concerned, have you forgotten it? Is it still coming? What's going on? Whereas if you just send an email out saying, well, we're still on for a week on Tuesday, then it's going to be to your own benefit because you won't have 20 people ringing up saying what's happening. And B, you're actually being proactive. Comms is a big thing. I think there were some educational pieces. Janie Strange wrote one, or a group of us did, called Educating Rita, which was how do service charges work, what are Section 20Bs, et cetera, et cetera. ARMA/TPI wrote one on what do property managing agents do, because I think people don't really appreciate the full remit of the job. I think there's education that the government can do, and I don't mean that from the sort of big brother thing, but to my mind, when you're first buying a leasehold, I've always said this, that when you go into an estate agent, that's when somebody should say, the service charge of this block in this unit is, the reserve fund is, the council tax is, and I notice you've got a dog, he can't go. Make your mind up. Whereas as you know, what happens is people move in and you send them a service charge demand. They go, oh, wait, what's this? I don't have to pay this because I own my flat. It's a fundamental misunderstanding about communal living. It will never go away. I was out in Australia to learn about strata, and a guy stood up and said, I'm an Australian. There's nothing I love more than having a barbecue, chicken barbecue on a Sunday. My upstairs neighbor cannot stand the smell of that. We will never, ever see eye to eye. So communal living is always going to be difficult. It doesn't have to be, but there's always going to be friction.
Oh, absolutely. And funny you should say that about estate agents, actually. I was chatting to somebody yesterday and saying, that is where the education starts. The reason behind that is my cousin's recently bought a flat and she knew nothing. Or she was in the process of buying a flat. One, it was a new build. So they didn't have a budget. They didn't have an agent. They didn't have anything in place. The estate agent didn't really tell her anything. I checked her lease for her and noticed that they were trying to charge her ground rent, which they can't do on new builds. So there's all these things that I was going through with her, and even her solicitor wasn't picking up on some of this stuff. And I just think, where can we sit with, the education around it and educating, from the beginning of this journey? Because ultimately, as you say, when you move in, it's us that ends up being the bad guys because we're delivering the bad news that you can't have your dog and you can't have this. And as a dog lover, that kills me more than anything, trust me. It's a horrendous thing to do, and it's not nice.
But we need to know these in advance. There was that infamous case where I think it was £400,000 was spent by a couple on arguing about their dog. I fell into that. I paid a solicitor when I moved into my flat 25 years ago, so nothing for me to read. There was this big lease thing, just put it in the drawer. And I was thinking of selling about a decade later. Have you made any adjustments? Oh, gosh, yes. Did you get landlord's approval?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then suddenly I had to go to the landlord and say, this is what I've done. And there were issues with what I'd done. And, it was just from, I didn't know. And I think that's the case. And you can't blame people for not knowing. I don't think, having just gone through conveyancing recently, it's not a very informative thing. It's more a box ticking exercise. But again, that's what I'm saying. I think government can come into this a bit, and we can help, or the industry can help. Just tell people what's involved. Again, we're down to communication, though, aren't we?
Absolutely. And what's expected of you as a leaseholder, as well as what is expected of your managing agent or your RMC, and all that kind of stuff. So thank you so much for taking the time to chat to me. One final question: what advice would you give to somebody looking to make an impact in this industry?
We need people to take an active part in this industry. You can just leave it up to the TPI, but get involved. Take part. If you're at conferences, if there's something you want to talk about, go and talk to people. Even put yourself forward as a speaker. Obviously learn. So there's a whole range. I'm going to plug TPI here. There's a whole range of training courses there, but it is a complicated business, and it's your own interest to learn more and more, and your responsibility to your leaseholders. Join TPI committees, even apply to join the board once you've got a bit of experience, but get involved. Don't just sit there and be one way. So learn, talk, take part.
Thank you so much for being with me today.
No,
I really appreciate it. It's been a great podcast, and I'm sure my listeners will really appreciate your advice and everything. So how can people find you if they want to connect with you?
LinkedIn's the easiest one. I don't use social media. Much to the annoyance of my ex-staff, I don't do
I'm
social
sure.
media.
Brilliant. Okay, thank you so much. I'll pop your LinkedIn information in the show notes anyway, so people can just click on it if they want to connect with you. So Thank you very much for your time.
Look forward to seeing you soon.
Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my latest podcast. You can find me on LinkedIn and Instagram. The links are in the show notes. Or you can contact me on jodie@jodiefraser.com. For more content and updates, don't forget to subscribe to this podcast on your favourite platforms. Thank you once again for listening. Until next time, take care.